The Leap Foundation proudly presents the Meet the Mentor podcast with Dr. Bill Dorfman. Dr. Bill is a TV host, New York Times bestselling author, two-time Guinness World Book record holder, fitness guru, celebrity cosmetic dentist, and philanthropist who founded the Leap Foundation. Here's Dr. Bill.
Hey, Dr. Bill here. So we are about to do another exciting Meet the Mentor. While I mention this, Leap this year is going to be phenomenal. We already have commitments from Anthony Hopkins. By the way, I watched his movie, One Life, last night. If you do, sit with a box of Kleenex, because I went through the entire box. For those of you that don't know, he plays a character named Nicholas Winton, who basically saved 669 Jewish children from Czechoslovakia from going to the death camps. And it is an emotional, inspiring movie. And of course, he's brilliant as always. So watch One Life. It's on Amazon Prime. But we have Anthony Hopkins coming, Shay Mitchell, who has a multi-million dollar successful luggage line at Nordstrom. She'll talk about that and her acting career. Of course, Paula Abdul every year. We have Taylor Zachar Perez, who's making a huge splash in the entertainment world. And I think I might even have my daughter Anna come. For those of you that don't know, she is launching a really inspiring music career. You should follow her at Its Anna, A-N-N-A. She's starting to release a bunch of music, and it's very, very exciting. So those are the highlights. Leap will be at USC this year. Never thought I'd say that, but it's happening. The dates will be July 21st to the 27th. And for more information, you could go to www.leapfoundation.com. And I hope to see you there. If you are a parent, you have a student age 15 to 25, please check us out and send your kid. I promise you, we will send you back a better kid. What we do at Leap is we teach these young students the skills that they need to be successful in life that they don't normally learn in school. Time management, money management, study skills. We teach them networking. And I mean, it's just an amazing program. We've done this, like I said, for 17 years with tremendous success. So we started doing these Meet the Mentor videos to kind of give students content throughout the year to kind of like hold them over until Leap happens. And this year, we've had some amazing speakers. Another one today is J.R. Martinez, who I just realized I met on set at the doctor's when I was treating a patient. We brought him in as kind of a specialist, and he'll explain to you why. But J.R. Martinez has crafted a narrative of unwavering resilience and triumph. This Army-Iraq war veteran and versatile talent defies expectations, leaving an indelible mark on entertainment, literature, and motivational speaking. Martinez's journey took a turn for the worse in 2003 when a roadside bomb engulfed his Humvee in Iraq, resulting in severe burns up to 34% of his body. Over 33 surgeries and 34 months recovery later, Martinez engaged with a newfound purpose, evolving into an inspirational speaker, leaving a lasting impression on audiences worldwide, including corporate giants like Delta, Wells Fargo, and General Motors. Transitioning into Hollywood, Martinez's career was highlighted by a 3-year run on All My Children and a victorious run on Dancing with the Stars, which catapulted him to a broader audience. Not just a survivor, but a New York Times bestselling author, his memoir, Full of Heart, resonates with its powerful narrative. Balancing a thriving career, education, and family life, Martinez's journey continues to unfold. A sought-after motivational speaker, actor, and family man, he inspires audiences worldwide with his resilience and his optimism. And JR, welcome to Meet the Mentor.
Thank you so much for having me on, Dr. Bill. And, it's just another one of those examples where I find myself as I've sort of navigate through life, I end up kind of full circle coming around and meeting people that I've met before. And, just kind of, you forget about the people you've met. You forget about the things you've done sometimes. And I think, obviously, we'll get into it. It's one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is trying to reflect, because there's some great experiences that I've had and some great people I've been able to meet. But luckily, I always say that good people always find themselves in the same room. So it's great to be here with you today.
One of the things I really admire about you is, they say, when you're handed lemons, make lemonade.
Yeah.
And you've done that to the nth degree. A lot of people in a situation like yours would never thrive, would never turn around. And I really admire how not only have you taken, what's happened in your life and turned it into as positive an experience as you can, but also use it to help people. And I'd like to really understand like where that narrative came from, what deep inside you really inspired you to kind of make the best out of a horrible. Well, actually, start with what happened, because kids watching this have no idea what you went through. So why don't we start with that?
So when people say make lemonade, when you're handed lemons, you make lemonade. I don't know about a lot of people watching, but lemonade is not one of those things that I like so much. Sometimes it's a little too tart for me, and so it doesn't kind of register with my palate, and so I kind of throw a little sweet tea in there, I'm a Southern boy, so I throw a little sweet tea in there just to add it a little flavor and make it enjoyable. And so, I'm making lemonade, but I'm also throwing a little sweet tea along the way. But how you essentially create that sweet tea, I think for me, it's been a lot of reflection, spending a lot of time reflecting, spending a lot of time practicing gratitude, spending a lot of time sitting in silence and being completely honest with myself and connecting with my breath and understanding that no matter what situation I'm dealing with in the moment, that I'm alive and I am more than capable of dealing with that. But that has to come from evidence, right? That has to come from somewhere. That can't just be a naive perspective that you just say, I'm just gonna, the reality is like from a career standpoint, my life has been very much like a Forrest Gump, where like, sure, I'll try that.
Right.
Sure, I'll try that. But there's always been a thought process related to it.
Let's start like what happened. I mean, look,
yeah.
You woke up just like you do every day. You're going to work, which is, in the Army, and, all of a sudden, bam, so tell us what happened that day.
Yeah. So, on the 5th of April of excuse me, on the 5th of April of 2003, I was in the Army. I was essentially 7 months out of high school. I joined the military. I joined the Army a year after 9/11. And I was driving a Humvee through a city called Karbala in Iraq when the front left tire of the Humvee that I was driving ran over a roadside bomb. And I was the driver, and there were 3 other soldiers in a vehicle with me, and they were all thrown out of the vehicle, but I was trapped inside. Within a matter of seconds, this Humvee was now engulfed in flames. And I was trapped inside of this burning Humvee for 5 minutes and completely conscious and, just feeling a lot of pain, obviously feeling as if I've been in this Humvee, not just 5 minutes, but 50 minutes. I mean, it just amplified, right? The amount of time that I felt that I was in this situation. And there was a lot of chaos, right? There was a lot of chaos. I could actually see out of my Humvee and I could see people running around. And, we're taught in the military that when something happens, you set up a perimeter, you try to determine what's exactly going on, if there's poses any other threat before you can actually go in and try to check on your comrades. You don't just run into a scenario because now you could potentially endanger somebody else. And war is a game of numbers, right? You don't want to lose more than 1, more than 2, more than 3. So that's why you have to be very careful. So that's why I was trapped for 5 minutes, because it took them a second to set up a perimeter to evaluate, am I still in the Humvee? Who else is in the Humvee? Who's not? Um, you know, And I can see out of the Humvee and see all these guys running around, and it was just sounded like chaos. And I obviously felt this excruciating pain coming over me. But then there were several, there were these moments, these instances that my eyes would get really heavy. And I think all of us can relate to that when we're really tired and we're trying to stay up and watch a movie or a sport, event or whatever it is. But your eyes are winning that battle, and you're sitting there, and you're just on the verge of closing your eyes, and then suddenly you close your eyes and you wake up a few hours later and you're like, what happened? And that's what happened to me. My eyes were getting really heavy and they closed. And in the midst of them being closed, there was silence. There was no noise. There was no chaos. There was really no pain. It was really just silence and stillness. And it was me listening to my own breath. And it was me talking to myself. Now, I can start on the 5th of April of 2003, right? Tell that story. But in order to truly understand, and I know we'll unpack this, but to truly understand how I was able to persevere, you have to look at the previous 19 years of my life and how the circumstances that I was presenting with in the first 19 years of my life prior to this tragic event prepared me, conditioned me. Resiliency isn't something that suddenly you have. Resiliency is something that's been conditioned over time and continuously just worked on and worked on and worked on. So finally, in those moments where I would be with my eyes closed and I would listen to myself breathe, but I would tell myself, you can't keep your eyes closed, because if you keep your eyes closed, JR, that's it, you're giving up. And I would open my eyes and I would continue to scream and yell, hoping and praying that someone come and pull me out of this Humvee. And that happened several times over the course of these 5 minutes until somebody finally pulled me out and started the medevac process.
My best friend was in Costa Rica on a little like three-wheeler going up a hill. And unbeknownst to him, there was a tree root kind of sticking out sideways on the road, and he hit it and he flips over. Now he's 200 feet up in the air, like you could see down. Unbeknownst to him, there was a ledge about 15 feet down, which had there not been that ledge, he would have fallen 200 feet. But he said it was the weirdest thing, because as the thing flipped over and he knew he was going over that ledge, in his brain, he thought, oh my gosh, this is how I die. I mean, that's what was in his brain. And, fortunately for him, when he flipped over, the Humvee, or that wasn't a Humvee, that three-wheeler went 200 feet down. It bounced. He stayed on that ledge, and, his friend saw the whole thing happen and went down and rescued him. And when he woke up, he was shocked, because he's like, I honestly didn't think I would wake up, like in his brain. And I was just wondering if, as you were going in and out of this, and, everything's burning, and, at any point, did you ever think, oh my gosh, this is how I'm going to die? Or did you just know from the inception of this, like, no, I'm going to survive this?
No, I 100%. It was a balance of both, to be honest. I mean, I definitely had a lot of thoughts where I said to myself, this is how I'm going to lose my life. This is how I'm going to die. I'm never going to be able to do the things that I've always wanted to do. My mother's worst fear would become a reality. I definitely had a lot of those thoughts. But then I would say to myself, on the flip side of that, hey, you can't allow yourself to get consumed by this. Hey, you're a fighter. Just stay alive. Keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting. And that's what I would continue to do. And, talking about your friend and that experience and how he said, everything slows down. I think that's when people have these near-death experiences and they're blessed to have a second chance, to be able, I think that's why we sort of navigate life a little bit differently, right? We just have a different perspective. We have a different, we're conditioned differently. And so for me, when things get chaotic in my life, which all of us have that experience, things are busy and kids and their activities and work and God knows what else we're throwing on our plate. For me, I like to just try to slow things down. Just slow it down,
All right.
just enough. And I think
All right.
we have, your buddy and myself and other people like us, we have the ability to do that because we've lived through it. And at least I can't speak for everybody, but for me, things don't. My wife literally told me this the other day. She said, it's interesting because she's like, I told somebody the other day, I coach my daughter's softball team, and one of the parents was like, "Hey, coaches, the umpires are ready for you guys to get on the field and meet at the plate." And I'm like, got it, thank you. And here we come, right? And the dad said to my wife, I don't think JR understands the urgency. Like, the umpires are ready right now. And my wife said, I've never seen him like be frantic about anything. Like, and she said, she jokingly was like, I can come and wake you up. And she sort of acted this out where she was laying on my side of the bed, and she said, I could come and wake you up and say, babe, the house is on fire. And she literally, this is what she did. She said, this would be you, huh? The house is on fire. Okay. Get up, put on my
All right.
watch, grab my phone. And she said, yet on the flip side, she said, this is what I would do. Babe, the house is on fire. She said, I'd grab everything. And I'm just like, just slow it down. Just slow it down. It's a special
Yeah,
gift, man.
it is. It is. I think I'd be more like you though. So after this, you had 33 surgeries, 34 months of recuperation. That's almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Then what? I mean, now you're out of the army. You've gone through a lot of physical trauma, and then what'd you say to yourself at that point? Like, what do I do next? Like, what happened?
Well, that's a there. I mean, that's a loaded question because there were so many things that transpired within those nearly 3 years of me being in the hospital, from seeing my face for the first time and obviously understanding that identity that I had a connection with for 19 years of my life, that was gone. I didn't recognize this individual anymore with the scars, with obviously I looked a lot different than I look today. I didn't recognize that person. So that identity was stripped away from me. Also, I was told that I was not going to be allowed to stay in the army. Well, now that identity was stolen away from me because now I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do now? I'm out in this world and everyone's so happy that I'm alive. Yet I feel like I was the only one that was focused on the simple fact that I'm alive, but I'm never really going to live. And there's a difference between being alive and living. And I was fixated on, what am I going to do for a job? Am I going to be able to walk out in public like this without people, screaming and wanting to run away from me? Am I ever going to meet anybody? Am I ever going to have kids, have a family? I'm just going. I mean, you understand this. You start feeding your brain and you just
Right.
start going down this hole and digging it deeper, deeper, deeper. And then 6 months after, well, let me backtrack for a second because I think this is important. So in the midst of me sort of being in this space and marinating in these thoughts and putting a lot of energy into it, one day, after a real intense conversation with my mother and a lot of that sort of why me, we came to the conclusion that became my new goal. I sort of had to let go of this long-term vision of what my visions used to be and my goals used to be. And I had to simply focus on this moment and this day. And I had to practice gratitude. I had to find something to be grateful for every single day. For me, it was purely short-term, surviving the day, changing my mentality. And I think I can say this to you. I can't really share this in a lot of spaces because some people are not quite comfortable, hearing certain stories as far as a burn survivor and the recovery process. But when a burn survivor will tell you, although the moment that they were injured, yes, that was tragic, yes, that was painful. Almost every single burn survivor will tell you the recovery process when they take you to the shower, that is excruciating. And you could put the toughest person in your life in that scenario, and I guarantee you're going to hear them scream, yell, cry, all this stuff, just because they have to clean your body and prepare your body for other grafts and for the body to actually be able to heal. And that is painful because we overlook what our skin does for us, like how it protects us in so many ways. And so, I was just in this cycle, and I remember as I started to practice this daily gratitude, I remember one morning I couldn't sleep on my side. I couldn't sleep on my stomach just because of the facial burns. And I had to sleep on my back, which was already challenging in itself. And I remember, there were several mornings where I would start to get up and I would just feel this resistance. I couldn't sit up. And yes, I was weak, but it wasn't that. There was something else. And finally, I would always find a way to just get up and what is holding me back? And I wouldn't see anything. And one morning, I remember sort of pulling through that resistance, and I sat up and I turned around. And as you can notice, like obviously I have a right ear, but my left ear, this is part of reconstructive work here, but essentially the cartilage was on the pillow because I'd slept in that position all night that it just essentially just stuck to the pillow. And I turned around and I'm looking at, I mean, there's no other way to say this, but I'm looking at a piece of my ear on a pillow. And instead of that being a triggering moment, I instead was able to look at that and just be like, wow, I'm losing the old me, literally like what a snake does in a sense of like it sheds its old coat and comes in with the new one. Like I'm shedding the old me, which is leaving room for me to become who I think I've always destined to be. And that was the way I started to look at things. And then fast forward 6 months later, I'm asked to visit a patient, talked about my experience. Needless to say, I realized the impact that it had on him. And I started visiting patients over the course of the next 2.5 years. I got involved with a nonprofit to help raise awareness for veterans and their families. Shortly a year after I was injured, started becoming a spokesman and telling my story to help raise funds. And what that did is one, it allowed me to create a community for myself of people that have also been injured, that had the same concerns as I did, but also allowed me to connect with people that were just grateful for what me and my comrades have done. But it also allowed me to find service again. Because even though I was told I couldn't stay in the Army wasn't so much the thing that I was disappointed that I lost. It was this ability to serve, this ability to be part of something bigger than myself. That was what I was disappointed that was taken away from me. So it was a roller coaster of these emotions and this discovery of that identity that I have today. I was essentially creating it for myself, which I think if you're 19 years old, 18 years old, 20 years old, and you haven't had the experiences that I have, you still understand that sentiment because now I'm in the real world. Now I'm in college and I have responsibilities, or now I have a job. Like I'm trying to figure out who I am and where I fit in my community. What motivates me? What do I enjoy? What don't I enjoy? So I was just essentially still a kid figuring it out.
So let's go back to that time. I mean, you basically mapped out a career path. You became an author, speaker, motivational speaker, a TV celebrity. Give me some insight as to how all of this actually happened, And by the way, all you millennials out there, if I hear another millennial tell me that they're waiting for the universe to show them something, I just want to scream, because I think JR will attest to the fact that the universe doesn't really care about you.
Yeah.
You care about you, and you need to make stuff happen.
Yeah.
Because you could sit there and wait till you're 200 years old and the universe is going to go by you. So don't count on the universe showing you anything. I'm pretty sure all of your success happened from, something deep inside you that you actually, exercise to make that happen.
Yeah. So they say knowledge is power, right? And I believe in that sentiment. However, I like to add something to it because I think that's what you're talking about. So I say knowledge is power. Yeah, that's great. But knowledge applied is even more powerful. And I think a lot of us sort of retain all this information. It's like people that read a lot of books and they go to a cocktail hour and they can say all the great things, but are they applying those things? No. It's like, what you should be doing, but are you doing those things? Okay, well, that's the difference. Like you understand what you should be doing, but are you actually applying those things? That's the difference. And so for me, a lot of my life and the success that I've been able to generate for myself I am going to say has come from me really listening and paying attention to things the universe that has thrown at me. And I will, and let me just quickly just give you sort of quick bullet points as to examples of this. So a nurse asked me to visit a patient 6 months after I was injured. I did it. Needless to say, I was like, oh, this feels good. I like it. A year after I was injured, someone encouraged me to become a spokesman for a nonprofit. I was like, fine, I'll try it. I listened. I went and did it. It felt good. Someone then suggested, hey, you should be a speaker. I don't want to be a speaker. Why? Because I was 20 and I was like, girls don't like speakers. Like, I want to do something that's going to make me appealing, to girls, because that's where my thought process was. Needless to say, I was like, I tried it one day because people kept encouraging me and I tried it. Needless to say, I was like, oh, I think I could do this. People said, you should try out for All My Children. They're having this huge casting call. I tried out. Guess what? I got the job. Well, then someone kept throwing out like, "Oh, would you ever go on Dancing with the Stars?" And I was like, "Yeah, it'd be fun." I just never really put a lot of thought into it. I just sort of entertained the question. Needless to say, fast forward 3 years later, after I was on All My Children, somebody again resurfaces like, "Hey, All My Children's canceling later this year. What happened with that dancing thing?" I was like, "Why does this keep coming up?" So I went and asked the executive producer of All My Children, who had become a dear friend to me and my wife. And I said, "What are your thoughts?" She said, my God, you'd be great. I'll make the introduction." Makes the introduction. I go on the show. People then,
Dina Katz, right?
yeah, yeah,
I
Dina
know
Katz.
Dina. I love her.
Yes, love Dina. And then people said, "You should write a book." Me write a book? No, what am I going to write a book about? No, you should. And so there's been a lot of me listening to the universe and what people are saying to me and suggesting, because they see something in me that I sometimes may not see in myself. But the difference is I'm taking that information and I'm doing something with it. I'm not just sitting here saying like, "Oh, I should go on dancing. Oh yeah, that'd be cool." And then just kind of, "Oh, I should try out for All My Children. Oh, okay, that would be fun to try, but yeah, I'm not going to do it." No, I just, at this point in my life, I'm like, I'm just going. I'm going because I've already beat the odds. I'm alive. Like, so everything else is just the cherry on top, right? It's just a bonus in that regard. And that's the way I have essentially navigated. Now, there is some other component that I think is incredibly important. And it's important for me as a father, as a husband, as a friend, and as a man to really talk about. And that's me really understanding what vulnerability means. For a very long time, I am Hispanic. In our community, vulnerability is not something that we are taught. It's not something that we're introduced to. It is not something that is discussed. And I know that's the same for a lot of other cultures, ethnicities. At the same time, I was in the military. You don't show vulnerability, right? You don't show emotion. You don't do those things. And for a very long time, and I know we don't have a lot of time today, but for the first 19 years of my life, all I've been looking for is community. I've been looking for a place where I can feel like I'm embraced and I'm unconditionally loved. And there's a whole context that we don't have time to get into, but there was a whole 19 years of life that made me feel that way. And I've just been looking for that. And when I got out of the army, listen, yes, I was starting to do my speaking. I was starting to do a lot of other things. But listen, I wasn't really truly accepting of my situation. I hadn't completely understood it. And I was really honestly an unpleasant kid to be around. I was 22 years old, 23 years old, 24 years old, and I would have these moments of being really resentful because now I was in the real world and the people didn't have to treat me a certain way. People were really honest with their emotions, whether they thought from a speaking standpoint, no, just go talk to veterans. I think you're good just doing that. So they didn't see the value that I can bring. And it was really discouraging and triggered me in a lot of ways. And what turned my life around truly was a moment when my now best friend one night encouraged me to sit in the passenger seat of his car. And he said, "Man, you need to cry." And I was like, "What do you mean cry? I don't need to cry." And he said, "Yes, you do, man. You need to cry." And before you know it, Dr. Bill, I just started crying. And I had no idea why I was crying. And I just started unpacking all this stuff. And it was stuff that, yes, stuff from my injury, But surprisingly, there was a lot of stuff that I had been carrying with me from the first 19 years of my life prior to that tragic accident. And let me tell you how powerful that interaction was with my now best friend. He would always tell me he loved me every time we ended a conversation, every time we, would see each other in person and we would go our separate ways. And he would always say that. And I would always respond in a typical guy way, like, all right, bro, I'll talk to you later. Like it was really uncomfortable because my father wasn't in my life. I never was conditioned or taught how to hear another man say he loves me, for me to tell another man. So it was really odd. Well, that night when he encouraged me to cry, and I did, I was the first one that looked at him and told him I loved him because I felt like somebody actually was showing up for me. I felt like he was not judging me based on the things that I was sharing. I felt like he was just receiving me. And from that, I identified I wanted so badly for the world to see me for what I truly am, but I wasn't ready to be vulnerable. After that interaction, I started really understanding that I needed to be vulnerable to really create connection and depth where there's real solid love for people, for them and them for me. And I just continued to just, when I went on All My Children, when I went on dancing, I was vulnerable. I mean, I went on dancing where there's 20 million people that watch that show every week, and I cried on that stage, on that show. I didn't care. At that point, I understood this is what I need to do because this is my truth. This is how I feel. And this is my way of healing. At the same time, I'm creating connection with a lot of people. And now I have the thing that I've always been looking for, which is a community of people that love me unconditionally.
That's awesome. I want to touch on three things real quick. Number one, your speaking career.
Yeah.
How did you launch that? Are you with the National Speakers Bureau? Do you just book all your own things? Like, how did that career actually initiate, and what propagates it at this point?
So for excuse me. So the early stages of my speaking career, I was doing a lot of advocating on my own. A lot of, hey, Dr. Bill, can you give me a chance? Can you give me 10 minutes to come and speak at Leap, right? And I would and you would say, okay, what's your fee? No fee, just give me a sandwich, right? Just feed me. That's all I needed. And for me, it was an opportunity to work on my craft. I would ask you, could I film it? And I would have a friend or I would set up a simple tripod with, I mean, this is 2000, 6, 7, 8, and at 9. And I would just have this little tripod and I would, watch the footage back and I would critique myself and I would study myself and I would say, man, my transitions here could have been smoother. I could have made up this point. Oh, people responded to that, so that's the way I was doing it for a very, very long time. Then I reached out to a smaller bureau that was sending speakers into colleges and universities. And because I was just a couple of years older than a lot of these college students, I felt like that was a real good space for me to sort of practice a lot of my material. And so I started getting booked in those spaces. And then someone suggested that I should be connected with the National Speakers Association. And they introduced me to the CEO at the time. And I remember having a conversation with her and she asked me, what is your fee? How much do you charge? And I said, all I ask people for is a Subway sandwich. And I ask them for a foot long. So that way I can stretch that foot long Subway sandwich out, 2 days. Hopefully I can eat part of it tonight and then the other part for lunch tomorrow, maybe even a dinner, depending on. And she would say, no, you need to establish a fee. And I said, okay. I was like, well, what should my fee be? She said $2,500. Now you have to understand something. My mother, a single mother, an immigrant from El Salvador, Central America, at the height of her career working in the United States, made no more than $45,000 a year. And now this woman is suggesting that I should charge $2,500. No, that's beyond me. So she says, you have to set a standard, right? So fast forward about, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, I'm still talking to this lady. We're still in communication. I ended up speaking at an event with another gentleman who, is successful, has a very lucrative business. It turns out that he and I were leaving this event and going to the airport in the same car, in the same transportation. We were flying to the same, location for our layover. So we had a lot of time to have a conversation. Well, we're at the airport. He says, I'd like to bring you in to speak to my company. What's your fee? And I said, well, this lady, she said that I should say $2,500. Now, notice something. I was giving myself a way out. Like I was giving myself the out that if he came back and said 2,500, I could be like, I know, I think it's crazy too. But if he would have said, okay, great, then I would have been like, oh, it works. So I still wasn't completely comfortable and confident with that, right? I didn't understand the value of my story and what I brought to the table. So I said that, and he stops for a second, he thinks, and he says, no, I'm not going to pay you $2,500. He says, I'm going to pay you $7,000. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, you're worth more than that. And so sure enough, I go and I speak, and now I feel this extra pressure because now I'm being paid $7,000 to speak. I got to deliver. And needless to say, after I was done, it was a great engagement, a lot of great feedback, positive feedback. Actually, years later, when after all this, the peak of my career and the successes, he brought me back to his company and I spoke full fee, and so it clearly was a positive thing. But I think the thing is for me, now I've been with agencies, I've cold called a lot of people to want to sign me, so they can advocate on my behalf. I'm now in a position in my life where I now have a manager who essentially takes in all these offers that come either from bureaus or inquiries through my website. She essentially handles all of that. She does all the work, and then she gets her commission based on that.
Right.
But I'm in that position now. But I would say this is that people ask me this question all the time: how do you get it? How could I get into speaking? I said, it's very different than when I did it. Right. I used to still have to put a press packet, a press kit together and send it to people, or send a DVD to people. Now you can literally leverage social media. You can leverage LinkedIn. You can leverage YouTube. You can.
But you know what? I think what you did still works.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Oh, it absolutely does.
If you have a message for high school kids, you go to high schools, you record yourself, you watch yourself. I mean, I just helped a young man who's a patient of mine who unfortunately ended up in jail for 8 years. And he's now the subject of a Mark Wahlberg project that they're doing with Mark Wahlberg's reality show. And, he said, Doc, I'm going to be in this documentary and I'm not really comfortable in front of a camera. Well, Raimi Warren was my media trainer. She still trains all the kids on American Idol and all these shows. And so I hooked him up with Raimi. They've been working together and it's made a huge impact. So, you got to have the steak and the sizzle. You got to, basically be able to deliver, but you also have to have the sizzle to get there. You had, the sizzle, and then working on the technique and watching yourself and perfecting that is a really important thing. And when you get to a level where you can go to the National Speakers Association, that's really awesome. I'm going to hit on two more things because we're running out of time. New York Times bestseller. How'd that happen?
So I had I'd been doing a lot of writing over the years, and it was more of just a therapeutic, journaling, I guess, if you will. And there was no intention of being a book. And then, of course, after dancing, a lot of people suggested that I should write a book. And I felt like, okay, I was ready. And so I was able to compile a lot of that information and then also still get into the writing process. And I was in a position in my life which is very unique, where I had a lot of publishers essentially like, just trying to advocate for the rights to my story and to be able to represent me. And I finally went with one agent, and there was a learning curve there for me, because I just naturally assumed that an individual that is my agent is going to do this and this and this. And I quickly learned that no, there's a lot of responsibility and things that you still have to do. And not just the writing the book, but you have to be, obviously really focused on the publicity component of it. You have to be, focused on, just really supporting the book for it to, have success and optimize that. But I ended up getting, because I knew that I was speaking all over the place. I was traveling nonstop. So I got a ghostwriter to help me. And this was actually somebody that had written for People magazine and had written some pieces on me years before I was even in the entertainment space. And so I had a relationship with her. And so I asked her to help me. So what we would do is that honestly, I would be on my way to the airport or on my way to a hotel or in between speaking gigs. And I'd be on the plane sometimes before it took off. And she would say, okay, here's a question. And I would just like talk, talk, talk. And she would write. And then I would get on the plane or in my hotel and I would just write, 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 and then send just tons of information to her. And of course, she was essentially editing this and sort of saying, hey, let's extract more from this situation, from that. So it was it was a learning curve. It was a great opportunity for me. I think it was a test for me because I had to be even more vulnerable and share more truths and dark periods of my life. I mean, you could talk about it on this podcast. Is it going to live? How long? We don't know. A book is out there and it lives for a very, very long time. And, people are always going to reference back to a book. And so, but it was therapeutic as well, man, because it really gave me a chance to go and, really reflect and revisit a lot of my life and the things that I've done. And, I found it to be very positive. And I'm in a space where I think emotionally, there were things that I wasn't quite ready to expand on. And here I am 12 years removed from that experience. And I'm like, through therapy as well, and through a lot of conversation with, people that I love and trust, I've identified that I want to write again. And there's other things that I wasn't ready to touch on that I feel like I'm ready to touch on now.
Cool. And then the last thing, real briefly, because we got to wrap this up. How did you get into the entertainment world? Because I know there's a lot of young people interested in that. Like, where do you go? What do you do? I mean, what's your entree into that world?
Oh man, again, a unique experience for me. All my children, soap opera that have been on the air for 40 plus years, very aware of a lot of doing storylines that were, very socially conscious of things that are happening. Wanted to launch a storyline about a veteran, and they thought, what are the odds of us finding a real veteran with some acting experience? I happen to get the email, I respond to it, and I do my audition, and I got the job. I never had any acting experience, but now I haven't been. Yeah, I know, it's wild. And then I was only supposed to be on the show for 3 months. It turned into 3 years. But I will say this, now I haven't been in the space and now I haven't been around a lot of people. The biggest thing I think it's important to do is one is, if for an acting component, is you want to get into acting, take some acting classes, right? If it's once a week, if it's twice a week, if it's 3 times a week, you got to work on your craft. You got to figure out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what you like, what you don't like. And then from that point on, you got to start reaching out to people. You got to do the work. You got to reach out to agencies. You got to be willing to take smaller roles and sort of leave the ego out of it. You got to have tough skin and know that people are going to say, no, you're not a fit, or we don't think you're strong enough, or this or that, and just take it for what it is. But there was a long time that I didn't want to take opportunities because I don't want to be pegged and typecasted, as they say, as the war guy, as the burn guy, the disfigured guy. And yes, there's some element of like pride, and I want to sort of protect that because there's other people that I represent as well that I don't want to be, interpreted a certain way. But at the same time, now I'm in a position in my life where I'm like, you know what? If a position presents itself, a role presents itself, and that's my way of showing people my ability, I got to do it. And it's my responsibility to now really cherish that character and really, take care of the storyline and who that person is that I'm portraying. But I think the key is take acting classes, reach out to agencies. Literally, there's casting directors and agencies everywhere. They're not just in New York and LA, they're everywhere. I live in Austin. There's a lot of people all over the country that are representing for different projects.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much. You are such a light and such an inspiration. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Hit me up on social media. I am JR Martinez. Simple. I can't wait to continue to connect and have the conversation with everybody.
Perfect. And we will put it in the show notes. JR, thank you so much. That was amazing. Dr. Bill, over and out.
Thank you.
To learn more about the Leap Foundation, go to leapfoundation.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Leap Foundation or on Instagram at Leap Foundation. Listen to the Meet the Mentor podcast with Dr. Bill Dorfman on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.